There are a few people in the medical world who are the faces of certain medical fields or certain topics in the science of medicine. You've probably heard of some of them. Now, there was a surgeon who seemed to have it all. The charisma, the talent, the groundbreaking research. He was hailed as a medical pioneer for regenerative medicine, promising a future where damaged organs could be replaced. Now, on today's episode, we'll delve into the disturbing case of Paolo Macchiarini, a man who embodied that image, but beneath the surface lurked a web of lies and devastating consequences. We'll peel back the layers to his deception as we explore his rise to fame, the whistleblowers who exposed his deception, and the devastating impact he made on the medical world. This is a story of ambition, betrayal, and the fight for truth in the world of medicine. As for his early life, there is controversy, but most sources agree that he was born in Switzerland in 1958. As for medical school, he obtained his medical degree from the University of Pisa in Italy. And for further studies, he was said to have trained in France. However, there are some uncertainties to his educational background. We'll go into that a bit later. Now, when he was 28 years old, he married a woman and he had 2 children with her. Later, keep this in mind as we go through the story of his life later, but he was married and he had 2 children. So, as for his educational background, he had claimed to have done many fellowships and earned various degrees in various institutions which were prestigious. One of them being the University of Alabama. He claimed to have pursued a master's degree in biostatistics from the University of Alabama. However, the university declined this and they denied the idea, stating that he had only completed 6 months of a non-surgical fellowship in hematology and oncology. He also exaggerated his work experience, claiming he had studied and worked in several prestigious universities. However, the extent and nature of his involvement with these institutions have been questioned. In addition, his CV was also falsified. For the institution he later worked with, investigations were done by them, and they discovered several falsehoods in his CV that were big enough to terminate his employment later on. Now, what catapulted him to success? So, he performed a groundbreaking trachea implant on a patient in Spain. This was groundbreaking because he said that it worked perfectly. So basically the process was that he would take a donor's trachea and cover it with the stem cells of the patient. So that stem cell covered trachea would not be rejected by the body because it was covered in the patient's own stem cells. The operation was initially reported as a success, but 10 days after the surgery, the patient was discharged from the hospital. Within weeks, it was said that her lungs functioned normally and there were no signs of body rejection. However, it's important to note that later investigations revealed serious issues with his work, including long-term outcomes of his patients. So basically, this was a big success for him. There were countless news stories declaring it a medical breakthrough and miracle, a lifesaver, a game changer. And we all know that it is not true. Well, now we know. However, the serious complications that the patient suffered were kept quiet for a very long time. Until then, this was a groundbreaking discovery in regenerative medicine, and he was catapulted into fame. He became the face of regenerative medicine. He was then recruited by a really famous institute. He was recruited by the Karolinska Institute. I apologize for my pronunciation. I'll call it KI. He got recruited as a visiting professor for the KI. And for the KI hospital, he became a consultant and surgeon. There, he is said to have tweaked his technique to where he used synthetic tracheas and then coated them with the stem cells of the patient. So the difference is that the tracheas, instead of being a donor's trachea, they were synthetic. He operated on patients at the KI hospital. It was questionable because many of them died. Currently then, it was reported that they died because of their illnesses and it wasn't because of the surgery. But it's important to note that it was kind of because of the surgery and that later be proved. But for now, he made his career. He started operating at the hospitals. He made regenerative windpipes. It was mentioned on an article that patients who received Paolo's synthetic tracheas at the KI, 7 died and the 2 remaining had their synthetic organs replaced by donor tracheas. This had a really big failure rate because only 2 of the patients survived. We'll go more into what happened and why it happened. But soon after, that's where his fall starts to come in. Well, there's two reasons for his fall. First was that he begins a romantic relationship with NBC, with a news producer. I'll keep her name private, but if you search her up, it's pretty obvious. It's on a lot of stories. But they begin a romantic relationship. They first crossed paths when they were making a documentary about him. It was called A Leap of Faith, and that was basically on his pioneering work in synthetic tracheas. Although she was a reporter, it's one big concept in journalism to never get involved with the subject, otherwise it will affect the story. However, it was love at first sight. That's what she said. It felt like it was love at first sight, and she didn't believe in that concept, but that's what happened. And they first started off as friends. Her ex-husband was dying of brain cancer, and Paolo offered her support as a friend and advice as a friend. Soon their friendship turned romantic as they spent an incredibly romantic weekend together in Italy. And the relationship progressed to engagement on Christmas, with a proposal of marriage as well. And what happened was that on Christmas Day, he presented her with a 100K diamond ring, claiming he wanted to surprise her with a lavish wedding in Italy. He told her that the Pope would officiate their wedding, Pope Francis, which would be attended by, and the wedding would have many numerous celebrities, world leaders like the Obamas and the Clinton. And he claimed that the Pope had given his personal blessings for the wedding between the two divorcees. However, as I mentioned before, he was married for 30 years, and he still was married, and he had 2 children as well. So she hires a private investigator to uncover some of his claims about his relationship with Pope Francis and the VPIs that were going to attend the wedding. And that was all a lie. And soon after hearing the truth, she threw the engagement ring in the Hudson River as an act of closure. And soon after, she worked on many documentaries like He Lied About Everything, covering her relationship and his deceptions. She also served as a consultant for the Netflix documentary A Bad Surgeon, Love Under a Knife, which further explored his scandalous life and career. She spoke publicly about her experiences, revealing red flags she now recognizes in hindsight. So that was one factor that led to his fall. Also were the whistleblowers. So in the KI, there were 4 doctors who raised concern about his work. And after seeing that the patients who received the artificial trachea transplants were not doing well, they filed a complaint to get him to stop the dangerous operations. In response, Paolo filed a complaint against one of the doctors that he had stolen his work in a grant application, and this was seen as an attempt to discredit the whistleblowers. But soon after, what happened was that the doctor was ruled by the vice chancellor of KI for being guilty of carelessness in the grant application, including plagiarism, despite the doctor saying that the data was jointly owned, and the verdict made it difficult for that doctor to receive grants and collaborate with others at the KI. Then, a year later, a television documentary airs stating concerns about Paolo's work, and this led the KI to order a new investigation, and that led them to dismiss Paolo, and the vice chancellor's verdict against the doctor was overturned. The complaints were filed by the 4 doctors relating to Paolo's misinterpretation of the success of his operations, omitting and fabricating data in published articles, and performing experimental procedures on patients without proper animal testing. So after his dismissal, he went to work in a clinic in Russia, and he started working there. But then all this happened, and that led him to his downfall. And then an expert also investigated the whistleblower's claims and concluded that Paolo was indeed guilty of scientific misconduct. So after all this happens, Vanity Affairs publishes an article exposing his personal deception. So this article exposes his the factor of his downfall with the NBC producer, and it revealed that he had already been married, but then he was having a romantic relationship with this producer, and how he said that the Pope of Francis would officiate their wedding and it'd be attended by like people like the Obamas and the Clinton, but this was a lie, and this was confirmed because that NCB producer, she provided evidence to support her account on his claims, and it was also confirmed later on that they had never heard who this man was who was claiming association to where they would be attending his marriage. And the article noted that in 2012, he was charged in Italy with the attempt to fraud related to allegedly persuading very ill patients to undergo risky surgeries at facilities where he had more favorable financial arrangements. So this article also exposed his educational deceit, where then there was the Swedish documentary. This one more focused on his work. This told the world on how many of his patients died and suffered, and he hid that for a long time, as long as he could, until it was found out. And they were basically failed implant surgeries, but he made them look like they were real. This series put the suffering of his patients as the center story. The fierce public response to the series caused a crisis in the confidence of the KI, and the KI decided not to extend Paolo's contract. And then various investigations continued, and several of his research papers were retracted. And then comes the legal aspect, where he was sentenced for bodily harm in one case, and then a year later, he was guilty of gross assault on 3 patients and sentenced him to 2.5 years in prison. And this was basically what happened. So his career involved medical misconduct of the patients that received his experimental tracheas. Almost all of them died, and then they suffered drawn and long out deaths. His research fraud investigations revealed falsifications in the research data, the publications, the success of his procedures, personal deceptions. He lied extensively to his fiancée, the NBC reporter, claiming his connections to celebrities around the world and promising a wedding by the Pope when he was already married. And also the CV falsifications, where he revealed exaggerated and fabricated parts of his academic and professional history. And his case becomes a cautionary tale in medical ethics and the scientific integrity, leading significant changes to be made in the KI and broader discussions about medical oversight being made. And so this is how he got far. He was able to lie. He was able to stretch lies to where they were believable but stretched out, and that's basically his rise, his success, and then his fall. The story of Paolo Macchiarini is a complex one. It takes both the light and darkness. While his actions were undeniably harmful, he sparked crucial conversations in the medical field. He led to the reevaluation of research protocols to ensure patient safety. And this episode isn't just about exposing deceit. It's also about the unwavering courage of those who spoke out, the whistleblowers, which was basically his fiancée, and the colleagues at the KI. Their bravery ensured justice. And also, we must pay our respects to the patients involved in the case. And for their privacy, I kept most of them I didn't mention them, but you can search them online, and you can research this case yourself to find names and to find pictures and to find a more detailed overlook on this case. So we hope this exploration left you not just informed but also empowered. Medical progress lies on trust and open communication, and by learning from such cases, we can create a future where medical marvels truly live up to their promises. And that was it for today's episode, where we talked about a groundbreaking regenerative medicine pioneer building a facade to false fame and then to his downfall. All this information was gathered from public domains and publicly available information. You search up Paolo Macchiarini and all this information comes up. I made this into a very short and concise step by step of what happened. I didn't go specific into the timelines or anything like that, but basically to give you an overview and to get you excited to, if you actually want to look into this case or just want to know that something like this happened and you know the person's name. And this podcast is just meant to basically put all this together and then give it to you, so you don't have to go out on Google and search them up and be like, okay, and you have to go through different sources. Kind of put it together, and it's an easy way for you to learn about something that happened in history. And that's it for today's episode, and thank you for listening. And we'll get back to you soon with a new episode with another interesting story.